Hey guys, welcome to our final unit in language arts, which is going to be on ancient Egypt. Now, I'm going to start off our unit by saying that this is a very, very quick overview of Egypt. Like, we are spending 2 weeks on Egypt when I could spend 2 months. There's so much information in Egypt. It's such a rich culture, this ancient Egypt. I wish we could spend more time on it. We just don't have that time. We have 2 weeks. So here's kind of how this unit is going to go down. We're going to have a video today on geography. We're going to cover all of Egypt's geography. Tomorrow we'll have a video on religion. And then on Wednesday, you'll get a half and half. Or you'll get a, let me try that again. You'll get a Newsela article where you'll get to choose either the geography or religion article to do for that. Then we'll have a video on achievements, a video on politics, a Newsela choice. We'll have a video on economics, a video on social structure, and a Newsela choice, and that's it. So we're going to finish this unit up actually in 9 days. We're not even going to take the whole 10 days. So it's a very, very quick unit. It doesn't take us, fortunately these videos don't go very deep. They're not going to take us very long to do. So if you want more information, I encourage you to go and do some more research on your own. I'm just going to give you some really, really quick tidbits of information. So when you go into 7th grade and they talk about Egypt a little bit, when they get into Silk Road and things like that, you're familiar with what you're going to have here. So we're starting today with geography. So I can click here. So the geography of Egypt. Egypt's civilization developed around the Nile River. Okay, and most of us kind of know that already, that the Nile River is in Egypt. It's located in the northeastern part of Africa is where the Nile River is. And I have a picture that I'll show you here in a little bit on a map. But Egypt's civilization, as all civilizations have up to this point for us, have all formed around this river because the river is so important with the floods and the rich soil, the easy access to water and food. It's a very reliable source. And so we have these civilizations that form around rivers. Egypt formed around the Nile. It's located in the northeastern part of Africa. Now, the Nile is the longest river in the world. It begins in East Africa. So if you go north, south, west, east. Well, it's west on my side, so maybe this side's west for you. I don't know. West, east. So it's on if you look at Africa, it's on the far side here, not too far from like the Middle East. So it begins in East Africa, and it flows into the Mediterranean Sea, which is about 3,500 miles. Longest river in the world, very long, very important to Egypt's culture. But it starts there and it flows all the way down into the Mediterranean Sea. Now, some important things about the Nile River is that it flows through a delta. So we're going to talk about what a delta is, but a delta is a geography term. Okay, it describes something that comes with geography and the way the land is kind of set up. A delta is a triangle-shaped area of soil. So it's this triangle-shaped area, and I'll show you a picture here in a minute, but it's kind of like it has the sea, and then it comes down here in this triangle shape of soil that is at the mouth of a river, so that's kind of the start of the river, that spreads out like fingers, which is located in Lower Egypt, and we'll talk about Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt later. So the part where this delta is Lower Egypt, and it kind of, I'm going to show you a picture here in a minute, where you can see all these like little like rivers almost that spread out like fingers in this delta, and the soil in this delta is really, really rich. It's really cool to see from a satellite, which I'm going to show you here in just a minute. We know obviously that the Nile River is vital to life in Egypt, because that's how ancient civilizations always are. That river is super important. This area in Egypt received very little rain. And because of that, the Nile was even more important. They needed that water for their living. Without it, their crops wouldn't have any sort of water. They wouldn't have water sources because they'd have to walk long miles to get to any sort of seas or oceans. So the Nile River is important because the area didn't receive a lot of rain. So let me show you some pictures here. So here's a picture of that delta that I was talking about. Notice it kind of has like a triangle kind of shape, and all these little rivers that kind of come off of it. Now it's all part of the Nile, but they kind of spread out like fingers that then reaches this water source here. This would be the Mediterranean Sea, by the way. So we have all these little fingers in this delta. Now looking at this satellite picture here, you can see that it's very, very green. There's a lot of wildlife that lives in this area. We're going to talk about it here a little bit later, but this area, you can kind of see these like black spots. The soil there is very black, has a lot of black silt in it, which makes it very, very fertile. But it's all green along this river, and that's because that water source is so important. But you notice over here all this sand, there's not water there, there's very little rain. So this river is so important to ancient Egypt and to Egyptians today still. So there were kind of two different areas in Egypt. There was, ancient Egyptians called the area near Memphis, which was a city. I don't know if that city's on here. Yeah, here's Memphis, down here. So Memphis, so this area and up, kind of all along this river. This was called Blackland. It was called the Blackland. And the reason it was called the Blackland is because of what I just talked about. Okay, it had very fertile soil, which was covered in a layer of black silt. So hopefully you talked about silt a little bit in science this year. I don't know if Mrs. Foster was able to get to it completely or not. But it's very fertile soil. It's very rich, and so it kind of has this very dark, almost black-like color. The beaches aren't black or anything, but it has a very dark color to it, kind of like black. And it was very, very fertile. So it was great for growing crops and things like that. And that's what this picture is down here. You can kind of see all this kind of wildlife that's growing in this black silt, that's growing in this black land. Now, opposite of that, not very far from the banks of the Nile, was the land that the Egyptians called the Red Land. And it was called the Red Land because it was very dry. It was a very, very dry, barren desert. Barren means that nothing's growing there. So no crops could grow. And so it was just sand and dry. And so this is another picture of what that red land would have looked like. It wasn't necessarily red, though sand did tend to have a reddish color in that area. But it was just nothing grew there. Everything was dead. I mean, you have your cacti and stuff like that would grow, but you couldn't get any real crops to grow in that red land. So we had the black land and we have the red land. The last thing we're going to talk about here in geography are some important cities in Egypt. And I just kind of went through and did every other one. I didn't choose the ones that are more significant over others. I just kind of skipped every other one here. So the first one is Giza, and Giza is super important. We're going to come back to Giza when we look at achievements in Egypt. When we talk about the pyramids and the Sphinx, those are all located in Giza. Very important area in Egypt. We have Cairo. Cairo is actually the capital of Egypt today. So again, another very important city in ancient Egypt as well. We have Memphis, which we just talked about, which was located more towards the base of that delta, which is where that black land kind of started. We have Thebes. Thebes actually had a different name before. I believe Thebes is a Greek name. I'm thinking Memphis even is too. When I really wish we had more time to study, we would talk about Greece and its impact on Egypt. But Thebes was another important city. It had a different name. Different maps would call it something else, but I can't remember what it's called. And then we had the Valley of the Kings. Again, the Valley of the Kings ended up having a different name too later on. But we'll come back to talking about the Valley of the Kings later as well. So we have some very important cities in Egypt. Some kind of maps here of Egypt. So to kind of give you an idea of where we're at. So we're in Africa. We have the Sahara Desert. This is the Middle East. We talked about the Middle East quite a bit when we talked about religion. Here would be like Israel, where we talked about like Judaism and where Christianity started. We have the Middle East, which was big for Islam. And now we're over here. We also, in this Middle East, here we have the Tigris and the Euphrates, which is where Mesopotamia was. So we're not too terribly far away from Mesopotamia. Up here is Greece. So you can see Greece isn't all that far away either, to kind of give you some frame of reference of where we are. We have the Mediterranean Sea up here. We have the Red Sea down here on the side. And the Nile River stretches a very long way. It splits down here. It's a very long river, like I said, longest in the world. Here's another picture of that, a little bit more zoomed into where we are. So we have, what's kind of odd about this, and I don't talk about it a whole lot, but the part that's up here towards the top was called Lower Egypt, and up here was referred to as Upper Egypt. That's because the start of the river is up here, and this is the end of the river, so this would be the Lower Egypt, and this would be Upper Egypt. But here you can see some of the important cities, like Cairo's on here, Giza, Memphis. Thebes would have been right here's Thebes. I'm not 100% sure if the Valley of the Kings is on here. I'm thinking not. Here, Valley of the Kings, so it'd be kind of in this area as well. So all those kind of major cities are all through there. That's where we're going to stop for today. Make sure you guys have your notes filled out for this. Tomorrow we're going to pick up on religion. We're going to talk about how Egypt was polytheistic. We're not going to talk about the specific gods and goddesses. They're pretty popular, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on them. But I do want to talk about pharaohs and things like that with it. So we're going to stop there. If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of us. Good luck.